There we go. And if there's anything you would like to say, just unmute yourself and we talk, right? So because we've practiced that yesterday, and let's let's continue with that. So what our question right now is, what is the now? How is the now? Um, there are some interesting theories around building on the the possibility of, or the our need of having receptors that we help us interpret a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Like we have eyes and ears, and maybe we feel something else, but it's just a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. And some people say that we feel this portion, we can notice that portion because that is what we need for survival. Right? That the world we experience is just like the desktop of a computer. It has nothing to do with the actual machinery of the world. Because we're just seeing a tiny, tiny portion. And the interesting question might be, what is this actual machinery? Does that question help us in any way? Or another question could be, how can we be more congruent about what we see? Right? How do we know that the green I see is the green you see? How do you know you see green at all? Like that's actually where part of what Frankfurt just talks about in bullshit comes up. We point to a thing and give it a name. We say, okay, that thing is green. And then you can agree, yeah, that thing is green. It's complete, made up bullshit in a positive way. We come up with a pointer for a concept, right? To cut through all of the noise of everything that's around us. And as you have this conversation with your new friend, there's a lingering meta question around that you might have, which is, how do you point at things? Why do you point at something that is relevant? Well, how do you know it's relevant? Why is it relevant right now to you? Right? Why am I looking at you now instead of looking at my phone or at my coffee or out the window? What makes something relevant? There's a neurophysiological machinery that helps you with that points to something that seems to be a fundamental mechanism of life. And maybe your friend has that too, which is, there's an eternal dance between opening and closing. And we will be doing a lot of that in our future sessions. Opening and closing. Opening means your default mode network, the part of your thinking machinery that stays in your subconscious, that's not that you're not aware of, scans everything around you all the time. And your task network wants to do one thing and is really picky. And their opponents, their opponents, they're competing. They're competing for something in between. That something in between turns out to be you. So while the default mode network sees everything, the task network picks things sometimes and then drops them again and says, "No, that's not relevant." This is why you can only remember so few things in your mind. You can only hold maybe 4 to 8 things in your mind at a time. How could you even make sense of the world by holding 4 or 8 things in your mind at a time? How can you make relations between them? That's why you do things like, I see Ingeborg doing that again. She did that yesterday, writing down. It's crucial. It's really, really crucial. That's your best technology for extending, expanding your mind, really. And conversation with others. Distributed cognition. We will experience distributed cognition in action between today and our next session. You will experience distributed cognition. Distributed cognition is when you put your minds together. There are experiments that show that if individuals are given a certain problem to solve, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering, what did you call that part of the consciousness or, yeah, cognition?
Which part? I didn't get that.
You mentioned a word that I couldn't catch.
Is a default mode network? Is that or
No,
the tasks
no,
network?
no, it was, it was,
Distributed cognition, is that the word you okay. Distributed cognition is many people thinking together. Yeah. With distributed cognition, we can do amazing things. We can build airplanes, for example. None of us here can build an airplane. I can build an airplane if I have a piece of paper, right? You can do that too, but you can't build a 747 or anything. But together we can. And it turns out if you give people a problem, then their solving capacity on average for that problem is roughly 20% among humans, average humans. But if you put some people together around that same problem, solving capacity for that same problem goes up to 80% of the inner group. That's the power of distributed cognition. Right? Your minimum you should do is have a structured conversation with yourself. That's better than just letting things happen. A structured conversation with yourself requires you to articulate properly. This is why you write down. You can also get in the car and talk to yourself because there you have privacy. Nobody will find that too weird. People nowadays will think that you're on the phone when they see you talking in your car. That's okay, right? But you need to create space in which you can articulate things with yourself and with others in a trusted way so that you can actually solve these problems that we're after. Okay. This is why we created our friends. This is why I asked you to also play with that exercise of writing things, stream of conscious, digging deep into your soul, and then destroying that. That has the same function. All right. So I don't want to go too deep into the shit show of what is the now, right? That we're experiencing. But I think we should point out a few things so that we're actually just aware of what's going on, right? So what would you say, any of you, just unmute yourself and say something, what we should as humanity be concerned about right now that's a real fundamental concern, something, anything. And we'll try and unpack that for a while.
Okay. I
Oh.
thought that Lars
Oh, yeah.
was unmuted here so himself to say something, but
It's
Go ahead, Mina.
yeah, I think the first thing that crosses my mind is the economic system that we're having right now, or just like
Okay.
yeah, how we're built on growth, and that we always need to go somewhere to be able to become better. That we need to grow to become better instead of actually just changing and transforming into something else instead. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
that for sure. That for sure is one important thing. Yeah, who wants to go? Who's here?
yeah, like the whole like culture of our human beings should change and should they change because like yeah, it's all about like fighting and money and destroying like yeah, be famous and be rich instead of like yeah, how to say fellowship, what heter det? Fellowship, feel fellowship, community, yeah. Because we are like so driven by our ego.
Okay. Okay. I would say there's one thing that taps into that, which is the perverse incentives of mm, social media at the moment, right? Which is mostly about hijacking your attention in order to turn that into money, and it's doing a really really good job at that. And while it does that, it also creates a fragmentation of reality because it gives you your perspective on reality. There used to be a time where when we met in the morning at school, at the bakery, in the metro, at work, we talked about yesterday's news or that that movie that was on yesterday. That sounds really weird, right? That movie that was on yesterday. Now that everybody can stream any movie to their phone at any time they ever want. How do you talk about these things? How do you create coherence in about anything if you are that fragmented, right? How do you break through the collective illusion of wealth being money if you cannot coordinate anymore? Because everybody in their heart, and I see some of you nodding, knows that wealth is not money. Wealth is much, much more, right? And not now, but I'll send it in the WhatsApp. I have a structure to think about how to think about wealth in different forms and how to not then have a conversation as a group around that. And if we cannot coordinate, if we cannot have a way to break through the collective illusions and tell each other what we actually feel, and want, we actually believe is a good life, then how are we going to break the multipolar traps that keep the growth paradigm in place that Nina pointed out? And yesterday, we talked about money, GDP, energy. Now we have politics and the economy measuring their success by measuring GDP. And we have a system, usually in Western democracies at least, we have a partisan democracy that is locked into a short-term marketing cycle that doesn't allow for depth and discourse. It only allows for the better marketing message. So it is a downward spiral of truth and depth of discourse. Right? It's becoming flatter and flatter. And so how can we break through that? As as we still want that thing, we still want that wealth, and we equate wealth with money, and that's a category error. But we cannot organize around that, so we cannot change what we want from our administration, from our politics. Because we cannot tell them, okay, guys, we have enough cars now. Thank you very much. That was a good job the last 70 years. We want something else now. Please do it. If you speak to business leaders, they have the same issue. They want to be regulated by politics. Why? Because in a free market, unless you're regulated, you will always exploit. There's no way you cannot exploit. As long as you're profit seeking, as somebody else will be more ruthless in exploiting planet or people. That's also called the tragedy of the commons. Somebody will exploit the system and then somebody else will follow because of the game, because the game they're in is about financial profit maximization. Okay, fair. If we managed to coordinate, then we could say, you know what, we don't care about that backing system. We don't care about GDP. Let's put happy children and healthy fish into place as a backing system. If we did that, then tomorrow we would have everything, the whole machinery being pointed at creating healthy fish and happy children. But again, also there, we're sitting in a multipolar trap because we're global. We're not talking about one country that can do these things. Or maybe. If you look at the GDP ranking of the world, and then compare that with the HPI ranking of the world. Who has heard of the Happy Planet Index, HPI? It was created by a think tank in London, the New Economics Foundation. And many years ago, and it builds on a few signals, life expectancy at birth, individual footprint, ecological footprint per person of a country, subjective happiness, and Gini index, the equality within the country. If you look at the Happy Planet Index and the GDP index, they're roughly flipped. And the country I'm in at the moment is #1 on the Happy Planet Index, but it's somewhere 86 on the GDP scale. For the US, it's the other way around. Now, what's the incentive for an economy like the US to change their basic measuring system if that means that in a global ranking they will fall? But how do we solve this? And unless they don't have the perception that they fall, they will not be able to change the political decision matrix. How could they? Because if you do that, if you make your country lose like that, then you will not be re-elected. Okay, simple as that. So you're not even going to start that conversation. That's the kinds of traps we're in. So how do we get out of that? This is not new. You're very privileged to be in a part of the world where something happened a long, long time ago and still is happening. The folk high school system, right? That originated in a similar time. It was actually, it came out of the salons of Goethe and Schiller in a time where it was just as weird as it was today for the people, because there was a transition happening, a cultural, huge transition going from monarchic system towards a democratic system over the course of 1 century. That's a weird transition. And people could feel that something was going on, much like today. And what was their response? Their response was, we need people who can really think for themselves, are grounded in themselves. And the question was, how do you get those people? Well, you give them time. You give them something like a meditation retreat. That's where that system came from. It didn't happen in Germany because of a revolution, a failed revolution, but it happened, and it changed. It changed the Nordic countries. You can actually draw a direct line between that and Barack Obama being president in the US. Because have you heard of Rosa Parks here? Anybody? Rosa Parks? Yeah. Did you know that Rosa Parks attended one of the few folk high schools that were established in the US? Right? That's what I would argue that's what gave her the standing to be able to say, no, I'm not fucking getting up, going to the back of the bus. I'm sitting here. I'm a human. That sparked the whole movement. She didn't create it, it sparked it. And Martin Luther King actually gave a speech to that end at that instantiation of the folk high school in the US at some anniversary of theirs. So this is a real thing. There's a connection between the salons of Goethe and Schiller and Barack Obama being president of the United States. Wow, right? Lars, you want to say something?
Yeah, and it points to what you said before, Thomas, that she went into an environment where they created this collective intelligence, right? In solving the problems of their time. So it was not individual processes, and then you stand in the space of a collective. So she knows it's not standing alone in that bus, right?
But it goes beyond that. There's a non-competitive collective, a collective in which you can actually cut through your collective illusions, in which you can show up as your true self, not scared. That's important, because if I can show you how I am, then that opens a space for you to show who you are, really you are, with all of your huge question marks and flaws and my question marks and my flaws. We're equal. We're not those cool dudes with who measure themselves by the bigger car and the bigger television and doing the competing with the Joneses thing, right? Once we understand we're all kind of the Joneses. And that's the environment we need. And in that environment, we can start playing. Because how do you actually move into an unknown future? So you might have been in a relationship, and for some reason or other, you might have thought about maybe ending that relationship. And you know that once you end it, that's it, right? That relationship is gone forever. And you don't know whether afterwards you have more pain or more gain. Sophia, see, just one, let me finish the thought quick. So you don't know unless you do it, right? The only way to find out whether something is good or bad for you is to do it. That's the only way. And the closest you can get to actually doing it, playing it. That's also true on the opposite end of a relationship. The best way of playing, living together, is traveling together. And that's why so many people travel together before they enter a serious relationship, because you see the other in real life. You cannot fake it if you're traveling. Okay. Sophie.
Just wondered if we could have a break.
Okay. Who else wants to have a break? Okay. So let's have 10 minutes. 20 past, we meet back here. Beautiful. Okay. See you in a moment. Okay. So I got some coffee and ordered a shamanic drum for my wife's birthday, which some of you could observe live in my Amazon. Okay, where were we? Yeah, play. So we already started playing, right? We started playing with the alien, and the fact that many of you spend a lot of time on just creating the alien or also having conversations with him, her, shows that you're having some fun, right? And we're not used to having fun when we do serious things, but it's good. It's really good. You should have fun. Why? Because you're 4 times as productive if you are in relaxation response. So you know about fight or flight response? Yeah? That's when the saber-toothed tiger sits in the bush or something that looks like it, or the car almost rolls over you or whatever happens. That's your fight and flight response. Do you know about the relaxation response? Interesting, right? That's the exact opposite. We have, much like the default mode network and the task network are competing in opponent processing, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are also doing the same thing. Sympathetic nervous system wants to keep you safe, right? It wants to keep you out of trouble. It focuses on getting you back to safety, right? Okay. It does that at a cost. The cost is that it directs all your energy towards certain points that help you in your fight and flight response. And it directs it away from others that you need. Don't need to think while you're running. Don't need to digest while you're running. You don't need to heal while you're running. Okay. So the more time you spend in that response, the less time you have to think, heal, and digest, for example. You need to get into a relaxation response. One way to reliably get into relaxation response is just to take a walk for 90 minutes in nature. And there's a movement in the US that's trying to actually put that into law because it's not only good for people, but they argue that it's also good for business, right? Because in relaxation response, you're 4 times as productive. So if you're having fun, that's a sign that you're in relaxation response. So let's play. Let's seriously play, but let's not forget to have fun. Serious doesn't mean that we don't have fun. Serious means that it's for a very specific purpose. Okay. So, you know this guy? Looks familiar? Who has a name for that face? Anybody?
Isn't that
Oh,
Churchill?
that's Churchill. Yes. Yes. So Winston Churchill, and as somebody who had to lead a country, he obviously had to think about the future, right? Where am I leading this country? That's an important question for somebody who's leading a country. It was also different times back then it was still more one old white dude leading the country. It's slightly different today. So he sat down, 1932, he sat down to write an essay. He called it 50 Years Hence. And he imagined, hallucinated a world in 1982. Now, if you read that essay, you will see two things. One, he was absolutely fucking nuts. He went totally crazy in this essay. You can sense it. It's enormously courageous what he did. Write these things. Because if it hadn't been him, I'm pretty sure you could have taken that for enemies could have taken that for a reason to put him in a loony bin.
What kind of stuff did he write? Can I ask?
Of course, he was imagining chicken legs growing on shelves in cellars run by solar. So synthetic biology and solar energy in vertical farming in cellars. We all have that stuff. Right? We have that stuff. That's the second thing. He discovered that many of the things he actually wrote in different forms or shapes, but they happened. Not all of them, but they happened. Okay. So do you think if Churchill can do this, you can do this too? Does anybody here doubt that you can do this? Show of hands. Okay, I take that as yes, you can do it.
Do you mean imagine the future?
Yeah, go crazy in imagining the future. Dream it. Yes. Okay. This is thing that will help you. Stuart Kaufman. He came up with this the theory of the adjacent possible. That's a big name for a little thing. You've all played with Lego in your life, have you? Anybody hasn't? You know how to play with Lego. So let's imagine you all have only have these Lego blocks, these with two dots, right? So and you constantly putting them together into bigger blocks so that you have something to work with as you're building whatever you want to build, right? You have a clear image of the future. You want this spaceship to help your little friend go home or something like that. And you're getting tired of configuring new pieces out of those building blocks, right? So you call up Lego and you tell them, okay, I'm constantly building this structure out of my pieces, and I'm really getting tired. Can you just produce it, please? They start producing it. You're happy. Everybody else is happy because now you have a new thing to play with. Now that new thing was in what Kaufman calls the adjacent possible, because all of its constituent parts were already there. Okay. Now imagine what you can do, all the configurations of pieces of Lego that you can come up with just out of one type of piece of Lego. That's combinatorially explosive. You can build anything out of that. Really? Now imagine everything you know, you as an individual, and you started recombining those things into new things. That's an explosion in itself, right? If you combine what you've read in the last novel you've read with what you heard in your last physics lecture at school, with the last TikTok you've seen, and you combine that into something new, that was in the adjacent possible. And if you do that with everything that's in your head, that's going to exceed the atoms of the universe. And it's a combinatorial explosive thing. So what is that to say? That is to say that if you can imagine it, it's probably in the adjacent possible. So with the current power of CRISPR, everybody knows what CRISPR is? No? Yes? Okay. Thank you for being honest and courageous and saying that you don't know it, because you don't have to know it. It's just I'm just making sure that we're all on the same page. So CRISPR is a technology that's very cheap and comparatively easy to use to do gene editing on live beings. So you can target the sequence, cut it out, and put in a different sequence. You can change the genetic code of a live being. So let's use that and turn an alligator into a dragon, for example. What's that? All we need is for it to start producing some gases, and instead of farting those gases, burping those gases, and having some way of igniting those gases. There we go. We have a dragon. It's weird shit. It's not totally undoable, right? It's there. It's in the adjacent possible. We have the technology to do this. We just don't see the point. That's why we don't do it. Okay, but what else don't we see the point of that we might want to have? We can only uncover that once we can put our finger to it, right? Like earlier I said, we agree on green because we all point to that thing that looks green and say green. So we need language to describe our dream of a good future so that we can uncover from the shadow of the future, that's what some people call the adjacent possible, what we want to pluck and build. Right? That's a little bit like the opponent processing between your default mode network and your task network. The adjacent possible, the combinatorial, explosive, massive opportunity space of the adjacent possible, of the shadow of the future, is your default mode. That's what's there. Your job is to pick what's relevant. That's what the task network is there for. And in order to pick what's relevant, you need to connect with your deepest humanness, because what else could be relevant than be something that is conducive to a good life or life, right? So I've been entrepreneurially active and entrepreneurial activist for a long, long time. And I've always talked about that good future that we want to build. But it always left this little feeling, unsatisfied feeling, because I couldn't explain what that good future should look like. I could feel it, but I could not put it into words. And then I came across that 50 Years Hence article of Winston Churchill. And I said, okay, this dude can do it, I can do it. And I invited some friends to try to do the same thing. And because it's so crazy, we didn't want to put it out into the open, but we printed it into a little book and we shared that book between all the authors, right? So everybody carries the same risk and it's not easily copyable. It's all good, right? Everybody gets one copy. It was like 20 people or something, so it. And we did that for a couple of years. It was nice, but it felt still unconvincing and not really satisfying because it was still just an articulation of some feeling, but without any real coherence in the space of possibility, right? One might be prone to talk about education. So the entire dream of their 50 Years Hence world was hinged on education. Well, that's good, but that's only a small portion of what we're about. So one day, a couple of years ago, I decided I'm gonna solve this. I didn't want to feel unsatisfied about this anymore. I'm going to solve this now. So I sat down to write a bigger version of that for myself. And I wanted to have a set of questions that I could ask myself about that world that would help me be satisfied that in knowing that I've covered more or less everything that should cover to describe an entire world. Well, that's a massive and weird undertaking, right? And I try to build on existing frameworks. I looked at Maslow and the SDGs and all these nice frameworks to see, is this helping me to cut through this feeling? And in a way they did, but it crystallized a bunch of questions. And so I developed for that essay I call Mother, I developed 6 questions that helped me figure this out. And I answered these questions from my perspective. And out of that effort, with the help of my friend Jim Rutt, we developed the 7 questions, and we deepened those 7 questions. Right? We made them more concrete, but more precise. And it turned into a process which we've done with hundreds of people across the globe to figure out what is our actual dream, to cut through the collective illusions of our day. And just recently, this January, I played with that again and used ChatGPT, Midjourney, and DALL-E to create a 500-page book of perspectives on these 7 questions. And I asked ChatGPT to generate the biggest, the most important demographic clusters of humanity. Came up with 7 clusters. I asked it to generate 4 personas for each of those clusters in the groups of child, adolescent, adult, and elderly person. I asked it for biographies for each of these people. And then I asked these people questions, the 7 questions and some more. And asked it to generate images representing their answers and so on. And put all of that into another book. I'm going to share the link in the chat. And through all of that, it turns out that ChatGPT is a really good mirror of what I've heard hundreds of people tell me in that lucid process. And what we will do for the next week is we will discover that for ourselves, or you will discover that for yourselves, what that is. So I'm not going to share any contents around this right now, because I want you to create your own version of it. I can and will share content later. So what we will do now is we will go through the 7 questions and we will discuss them. So you really get a grip on each of the questions. And really, we have a common understanding in this group what this question is about. And we'll do that for all 7 questions. And then I'll explain the process I want you to go through in the next week. And you start individually, but you end up in your groups. Okay? All right. I'm going to read this, and then let's have a conversation around this. What comes up for you? What are your questions around this question? How do we regeneratively and sustainably source, refine, and distribute the supply required to provide the necessary conditions for every member of the human species to live a dignified life? This includes dealing with limitations, managing buffers, and preparing for future generations and situations. Okay. Anything that comes up, anything you want to clarify, ask. What comes up?
That's a very, very big question. That's the first thing that comes into my mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What does it do for you if you say that's a big question?
I think just makes me wonder where to start. So I have to like break it down into bite-sized pieces and actually like think about all the elements of the question and then start to think about what I think.
Okay. So what are elements that stick out for you right now?
Well, firstly, it's regeneratively and sustainably source, like those 2 words. But then even regeneratively and sustainably are big words. And then it comes into source, refine, and distribute. So all those are kind of just that big. And then it's the supply required to provide the necessary conditions for every member of the human species. Like that's huge. And then to live a dignified life. What is even a dignified life? So it's like so many components. So
Bang.
Yeah, needs to be bite-sized, but I don't even know if that can be bite-sized.
It's huge, yeah. But
interesting and exciting.
Exactly that point. So yeah, break it up and write notes about each of these parts for yourself. So some things about what is a dignified life, and don't stay playful, right? Don't go into a fight and flight response, because that doesn't help you. Don't be scared by the magnitude of this question. Take it apart, answer whatever you want to answer right now, whatever comes up, what feels right. Don't get overwhelmed by it. And close in on the feeling that you might even have about this question slowly. And if you only get to 20% in the first round, don't worry. We will play several rounds and you will get closer. And you will get, maybe you still playing this game in 10 years, who knows, right? You'll get better at it. Thomas.
Yeah, I just had a general question about these questions. I found the 50-year essay, and I just read like a tiny bit of it when you mentioned it earlier, and it's quite out there. And I wonder, when you wrote the 500 pages on these, trying to answer these questions, and just trying to think about the future in whatever way possible, did you try to think as logically as possible based on reality how it is now, or did you just let your mind flow?
Okay, good. So first of all, I didn't write those 500 pages. I wrote like 80 pages in Mother, and I let ChatGPT write 500 pages, and I wrote 5. But in this iteration of this process, we should dream, right? Imagine you and your new friends, you go to a new, beautiful, lush planet, and you start a new civilization there. What should that look like? Right? You don't have all the baggage. You don't have to break through the multipolar traps and the collective illusions and all of that. How would you do it? Play God. Dream it up. That's what we want. Right? That's why 50 years, imagining a world in 50 years or on a different planet, is a good thing for this exercise. Maybe even 100 years. So you're not held back by questions of reality. Oh, how do we do this? How do we get Mercedes-Benz to change their business model? Right? And we don't fucking care. On our planet, there is no Mercedes-Benz. Well, maybe there is. I don't know if you want one, right? But only if you want one. So effectively, this, and you will see this in all questions. These questions are super abstract, and they're super abstract for a reason. This is a question of, another way to ask this specific question is, how do we organize an economic system? But that already biases towards thinking in terms of economic systems. Why should we do that? Right? Why should we limit ourselves to that lens if we can broaden our lens? We can just say, okay, well, actually what we need is not an economic system. What we need is the stuff that people need to live a good life at the right time in the right place without breaking, or without breaking the foundation for that same life, like we do right now. That's what we do. So that's why it's so abstract. Let's get away from those kinds of lenses, like the economic system and stuff. Let's just think, okay, what do I actually need? And how do I get it? And how do I scale it up to 8-10 billion people? And you don't need to be right. There is no right here. It's just a dream. There's a wish. Okay? And trust the process. You can go crazy here. You can play trust the shadow of the future, the adjacent possible. We just invented a dragon. We can invent a dragon, you can invent anything and feel safe. Okay. Okay. Are we good with this question? Any other remarks, questions here? Okay. How do we ensure signaling capacity that represents needs and desires of individuals in a balanced way? This serves as a binding modality between organizing supply, question 1, and societal decision-making processes, question 3. So, signaling. I'm sure there's a bunch of questions around that. What do you have? Nina, go ahead.
I don't think I understand the question. Like,
Okay.
I think I'm lost at the how do we ensure signaling capacity? Like, what does that mean? Yeah.
So, if you see, let's say, your society, the society you live in, whatever that means for you, as a superorganism, and you're part of that superorganism. Okay. And there is some behavior to that superorganism. It does things. And you somehow tell this superorganism how you want things to be. Okay. So you tell it by buying this toothpaste and not the other toothpaste. That's a signal. You tell it by going to that library and not the other library. You tell it by buying a car instead of taking the public transport. Or you take the bike. You tell it by voting. So what are these signals that you send to your superorganism so that it can do its job properly? Yeah. So that's a question. If I were to code that question in current terms of the current paradigm, which I don't want because I don't want to bias you, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I trust that you can see beyond that. This question is, do we really limit ourselves to money and voting? Or do we have more or better versions of those? Or not? Who knows? Alim.
Okay, I have an idea about this question.
I'm sure.
Because I'm living this situation in these days because of like, I realized this a few weeks ago, which is when you learn a new language, it's not so easy to clarify yourself or to explain yourself to with this new language, because you have a limited numbers of words for expressing yourself. And when it comes to that, and if you cannot communicate with any other language, with your opponent or with your friend or with people in the society, after a while, it's really easy to get nervous and angry, because like a child, and if you cannot understand what child is saying, then the child begin angry and begins to do crazy things. And I believe that people in the world, in their society, trying to express their self in different methods because of lack of enough words for expressing their feelings, their ideas. Some of them choosing to earn more money for showing maybe her or his willing or desire or something like this. Or some of them being like extremists because they follow a person who can describe or who can express their feelings or who can defend their rights. And how can we ensure, I believe, that we should let young generations or let all the people to make mistakes. Then they will learn, and if they make mistakes, they can describe, they can find new words, new definitions for new situations.
Okay.
And then
so
yeah.
So can I interrupt you for a moment? I love the exploration you're going into. And that's exactly the train of thought you could follow when you start thinking about that question. So what you're doing right now is you're closing in on the question so that you can find your answer to that question.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's not do that right now. Let's focus on understanding the question really. Right? And I think you've understood the question. It's about that kind of any kind of signaling to our superorganism what we actually need and want. And I love that picture that you bring with the child getting angry if she can't express herself, being like the terrorist blowing up things, because that terrorist is not heard either. Very, very nice. Thank you. Emily.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I got it answered a little bit, but it was just another kind of clarification of what the question actually means. Is it, if I'm understanding it correctly, is it basically like all the decisions we as individuals in a society make that try to affect how we want our society to be? Is that kind of what the question is asking about?
That's part of it, yeah.
Okay. Yep.
It's again, I don't want to bias you, but
No.
a signal, I don't know, let's say you have a tool to measure the cortisol levels of the entire population of the superorganism. That's a signal. Right? Or some other hormone that your body uses for its own signaling. You can expand that into the superorganism if you want, right? You don't have to. Maybe it's totally stupid to do that, but it's another signal, right? So that's the whole bandwidth. Anything is allowed. That is a signal that says, I want something, not only the conscious decision, right? Maybe it's only the conscious decision in your world, but you should take into account the whole bandwidth of possibilities. Ina.
Yes, this whole question just makes me ask more questions, really. Because you're saying like, should we limit ourselves to money and voting as the signaling systems that we rely upon? And then there is the issue of the data that is generated from social media and all those things that are currently owned by big corporations, and they sell it to other companies to kind of analyze consumers and consumer behavior. But then again, you're asking that you require that it represents, like, I assume that you mean the real needs and desires, and I would also assume that the data from Facebook and social media are not necessarily clean, in the sense that there's a lot of promotional activity going on those platforms. So I don't know. I was just like, there is money, there is voting, and there's a lot of noise, but there is also actual information available. on a large scale today, that it's maybe not accessible for the systems that make decisions for the community.
Okay, so several things around that. There are organizations like Nextdoor in the US or Nebenan in Germany that actually try to solve that specific issue of social networks signaling to politicians in a cleaner way. And of people who live close to one another in a more unbiased way. But that is still all grounded in Horizon 1, in the current paradigm, on this planet, in our current structures. We don't care about those. Right? We don't care about those at all. What we want is, we really want to think about, okay, are they, maybe we want to invent spaces in which people have conversation that then serve as a very clean signaling to decision-making processes. Right? Maybe that's something we actually want to do. Yeah, okay, then we do that. And we don't care about whether that's possible right now, whether we can get beyond Facebook or capture Twitter or whatever. We don't care about how we do this. We just care that we want to have it. Does that answer your question? Yes, no? You want to? Okay.
No, I don't really have that much more to say. I'm just, yeah.
No, let's spend time on this. It's important that we all are on the same page here.
Yeah. No, it's more a matter of like, is it a question about access to data or like creating what's new? And I think, yeah, you shed some light on that. Absolutely.
It's about both, right? Access to data, but also which data is actually important. Right? I once had an e-commerce startup, and I collected everything that I could collect, and then I couldn't make sense of it. I'd throw away 98% of that data because it didn't make sense of it. Nina.
I guess the question is twofold, I don't know. But would you mind, or would you want us to, in the beginning here, when we're thinking about this, that we stay within our own mind and not search input outwards in the sense of like inspiration and stuff, and just like let our minds go loose? And then I'm like, how loose can we go? Because I'm like, when I'm seeing this question, I'm kind of sure the paradigms that we're in right now would be consumer power and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know, we could have like, what in the future, we could have a technology that will measure the energies of the collective energies in the different of the entire world, and then you would get like these notions of, oh, okay, over here we have a collective need of something and it's more than usual, so then we have like some sort of community, or I don't call, what is it called, not like police, but someone being responsible for like telling, like, okay, over here you need to fix something, we need to look at this. Yeah, like how
well,
how imaginative can we get?
Full on.
Okay, cool.
So you cannot be too crazy in this. You simply cannot. It's practically impossible, right?
Okay.
Because if you can imagine it, you can safely assume that in 50 to 100 years, the technology to do it will be there because of the adjacent possible. Right?
Okay.
We just created a dragon. Seriously. Right?
Yeah. Perfect.
Good.
But then, and then would you want us to stay within our minds?
Well, you can get inspiration from wherever you want, and you will interact with others in this group. But I don't want, what I want you now, the process will become clear at the end. I'll share the process with you. I don't want you to share with the others in this group in your first instance. right?
Okay.
You can
Yeah.
you can get on the internet, you can speak with other people, you can do whatever you want, but don't share with anybody in this group outside of the process, right? You will share everything in the end, but I don't. But the reason for this is we want this to be as diverse as possible. So we want to reduce our biases in this. This is also why I prefer having the conversation around the question and not about and about interpretations of the question, not about content.
Right. Right. Okay. Cool. Makes sense. Thank you.
Are we good with this question? Anything else that comes up? Okay. You can always come back later. This is number 3. How do we govern society? How do we make coherent decisions on a local, regional, and global level? Who makes these decisions and on what grounds? How are they enforced? Right now you can see that this is, of course, connected to the second question. Okay. Thoughts? What comes up? Ina.
The first thing that pops to mind is the lack of a global community or a global decision-making body. Because the problems that we face today are to be handled on a global scale more and more. With of course like local adjustments and solutions being equally important, but yeah, that was the first thing that popped up.
Okay. What else? What else comes up? What are your thoughts, questions around this? So I'm going to break my rule a little bit about the content thing, just because I want to expand your options a little bit. What do you know about the configuration of democracy in ancient Athens? Anybody? How did that work?
One more time, please.
What do you know about the configuration of democracy in ancient Athens? How did that work? How did they organize their democracy?
Do you mean like with the like Greek gods and all that around that time?
Yeah, that time. That's the ancient Athens time. And how did they organize their city-state? How did they organize their democracy? Because that's what we historically tie back our idea of democracy. Nina, do you want to say something?
I don't know if I might be mistaken, but is it when they had, what is that called? Like techno, like this council of everyone being a professional within their field? I don't remember what it's called, but they have like a council of
I think that could have been part of it. Yeah, that could have definitely been part of it.
technocracy. Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you, Ina.
Ina.
Yes, I'm a little bit on thin ice because I'm always been really bad at remembering historical facts. But I think that every like citizen, which was a male, had like equal voting rights. So I think they distributed the power and then they had voting within the city. So it's more like that's kind of the starting point of democracy, the complete equality.
Yeah, in a way, that's correct. Their implementation was slightly different. In the first instance, they did not vote. In the first instance, it was a lottery. Yeah, that's right. It was a lottery. That's why I bring it up, because it really blasts open a space in the opportunity of how democracy could be shaped. Okay, so what they did was, you're right about the typical white male adult restriction, right? So among the the mm, the citizens of Athens, which were the white male adults, you were chosen by lot, randomly, into bodies of government. And you had the responsibility as a citizen to participate, to take part in that. It was your responsibility to do that. And there were different bodies that were creating a balance of power. And to the end of the point of the technocracy, or the lobby, I think they had something like that, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure. There's a really good book by a Belgian author. The name escapes me right now, but the book is called Against Elections: The Case for Democracy. And he lays all of that out in that book. And what you see, I don't know if you're aware of the things in France, that's the idea that came out of the Yellow Vest movement. So 150 randomly chosen people from the French population got together, or were put together into a group that created 149 policy recommendations around climate for the government. And the government now has to deal with those. That's how this idea is beginning to be implemented in our democracies. There's a similar thing that happened in Mongolia. A friend of mine was there to observe it, and he was extremely impressed. There was 1,000 randomly chosen Mongolians to rewrite their constitution. Wow, right? Randomly chosen people. Very high intellectual discourse. Reported by Larry. Larry is the guy who came up with Creative Commons. You might have come across Creative Commons, right? Have you ever seen a CC sign on the internet? That's the guy who came up with it. Okay. He also ran for president in the US, making 2% in the primaries, but he never wants to be president. He just wants to make the point that you cannot become president without a lot of money. Okay. And just to add one more, since I'm talking about democracy, you could also expand your notion of democracy by looking to Wales in the Future Generation Wellbeing Act, where the Welsh politicians are held accountable for a vision of the future of Wales by an independent commission that can veto any political decision if it's not aligned with that future. That's another a very interesting mechanism for thinking about democracy. Okay, just to expand our minds a little bit beyond what we know as democracy. So with this thing, please go crazy as well. Okay, anything else that comes up here? Okay, another big one. Emily, go ahead. You're muted. You're still muted.
I think just because of the alien like making the alien and stuff, I'm just not even on this planet. So like all the things that I think of are just like, I don't know, sci-fi. But so that, yep. Go on to the next question.
Yeah, I love that sci-fi, right? Use whatever you can, and that's maybe even a reason why we have this new friend. Yeah, who knows? How do we manage knowledge? How do we create and identify knowledge? How do we agree and or disagree on what becomes knowledge? How do we agree and or disagree on processes of knowledge creation? How do we agree on dimensions of knowledge? And how do we transfer knowledge across the planet and generations while broadening the capacity and maintaining integrity of knowledge? That's a beast. Any thoughts? So to me, the most important word in all of this is we. Because I can know things for myself. And what I know to be knowledge might be a weird belief for you. Right? So we have to find common ground. That's what this question is about. How do we find this common ground? I'm not going to move on to the next question unless I've heard something from one of you at least. I have time. It's 8:15 here. I have the whole day. Alim. Alim, you put your hand down?
Yeah, no, okay. I want to sacrifice myself for the group. Okay.
Patient.
And I believe that we create and identify knowledge from the results of the mistakes or failures. And yeah, but for the rest, how do we agree or disagree what becomes knowledge?
Yeah.
I think we should let it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I just want to issue a little warning around that. So when you were 1 meter tall, you definitely failed at reaching to the higher portions of a shelf, of a bookshelf. Right? It would be wrong to assume that the higher shelves of a bookshelf are unreachable. Right? So there needs to be some process of revisiting and recontextualizing your results of your inquiries.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you, Ina.
And I want to
right.
say about one more thing. When I heard that in Japan they built the like parks with grass, but they don't build the pathways at the beginning. They just let people walk on it, and after that, the people begin to find the shortcuts. And then when they see that, okay, the grass is more destroyed there, then they build a path there. And I think knowledge also comes like this, like people like find their way in a way, and yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
heard
all
that
for
story
me.
about the Stanford campus. I didn't know they do that in Japan as well. I think that's definitely one way for sure. Um, uh, but one could also argue that that was one way the Nazis did it. Right? That's how maybe the Nazis created their knowledge. So I'm not sure that is a way that should be applied to all dimensions of knowledge. Who knows, right? Maybe you're right. Maybe there is a way to solve for this, but maybe not. So I'd be careful with that. Okay, Ina, you're muted.
Right, thank you. The first thing that came to mind was the seed bank at Svalbard. And the way like managing knowledge. But like I guess that's tipping into like answering the question, but like I guess first we need to, yeah, what is knowledge? And I guess to me that is whatever describes what is real in our current point of evolution.
Okay, I want to remind you of something I said yesterday. 95% of your decisions come from your subconscious, from your system one. And the main configuration of that has happened by the age of 7. By people whose system one decision-making apparatus was also finished by the age of 7. That is an extremely flat evolution, right? Very slow, very, very, very slow. And so what feels right in system one might not be appropriate or relevant to the situation the world is in at this point. It might be, I don't know. It might be, but that's part of this question, right? How do we elevate some things into a different space? How do we as a species agree on stuff and make it visible and transferable and these kinds of things? Do we need kindergartens and universities and schools for this? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? And that's what this question is about. Okay. I know it's a beast. It'll take you some time to unpack it. I'm glad we talked about it. Okay, this is an interesting one. How do we relate to people? How and why do we form groups? How do we cooperate at many scales? What kinds of groups are required for the cooperation? And what are the social norms that drive our relationships, and what kinds of groups are required to fulfill these norms? Okay, what comes up? You're getting tired. Emily.
Nope.
I know you don't get tired. You know how to breathe properly. Do you all know how to breathe properly? Has Lars shown you how to breathe properly? No? Have you shown him how to breathe properly?
Of course, we did it at Leadership Lab, but it have tilted out their brains. But you can take it one more because it's so important what we do here, Thomas, doing all of this thing because it's so demanded is really to focus on energy management and focus management. Because if you get that, then you get fucking outstanding. And you need to know how to take care of your energy. That's why we don't run tired in meetings lasting 6 hours, right?
Exactly.
But you have to practice.
Emily, I'm not forgetting about you, but I just want to build on that point for one moment. So you know how to breathe, right? Not because your body just started doing that at one point, but because Lars shown you how to do it. That's the kind of breathing I mean. By the way, there's a really, really good book called Breath that everybody should read. Nina has read it. It's one of the more outstanding books I read last year. And so what I do from time to time when I have a hard nut to crack, and you have 7 hard nuts to crack here, is I prime my brain with that hard nut by writing down things. So I load things into my system 2, into my conscious, into my prefrontal, into my task network. I charge it with those things. And then I do what I call insight popcorn. I lie down and I do holotropic breathing for an hour. And after about 20 to 30 minutes, insights start popping like popcorn. Absolutely crazy. And it's because your brain starts producing DMT. You get into an actual trance mode. You get into dream mode. You create connections that otherwise weren't there. Right? So you can play with that. You can be careful when you do it. You can pass out. It's dangerous. Don't do it in a bathtub. Seriously. Yeah. Okay, Emily.
I've kind of forgotten my point now, I think, but how do we really relate to people? No, it was just like the first thing that came into my head with this question is like, I guess just like groups as in, or like relate to people as in, we're so used to thinking like we relate to people with family, we're friends and people we've met, but it's first thing I'm thinking is like how do we relate to people that we haven't even met and like bigger than what we're used to? And yeah, it was a very not finished thought, but it was the first thing that popped into my head.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's one aspect, right? My son sometimes is in a mode of walking around Berlin and he just greets people that he sees. That's weird for most people. That's nice. It's really nice. Nina.
I think I got like, yeah, some of the thoughts that I got as well. I think it's, why do we use language so much to relate to other people? Yeah, I think there's some untapped potential because we're very used to relying on people using words and explaining, and not necessarily, maybe we could be more sensitive to other kinds of communication. And also maybe speak differently than what we are doing right now. But yeah, I think
Yeah, maybe there's a place for dance, sing, and play, right?
Yeah. And also just, I don't know, energies or eye contact or what is said with your body without, I don't know, getting more into tune with small changes in how you position yourself in.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure you're aware of the kibbutz movements in in Israel. That's not so related to your question or to your comment, Nina, but they actually broke up in some of the kibbutz. In the early phase, they broke up the family unit. The children lived together in their own houses, apart from their parents. They had some time with their parents, but mostly they spent time without their parents. Right? So let's not even take the family for granted. Let's not even take the romantic love relationship for granted, because that's only 200 years old. Right? That whole thing, that collective illusion that Hollywood is giving us about falling in love with somebody and then staying in love forever and ever, because everything is just so cozy and beautiful. That's 200 years old. Maybe it's right. Maybe it's cool. Maybe it's part of evolution and we just got there and wow, maybe it's not. Who knows? I don't know. Right. But that's the kinds of questions we want to ask. Nina.
No, it just made me think of how communities worked before. Like you would have tribes and stuff that wouldn't have one partner. You would kind of, everyone would be each other's partner, and then the kids would be a common thing. You would never know who's in a sense. And then every mother would take care of every child, and every dad would also take care of a child, because you wouldn't know who's yours and who's not. So it's just more of that raising kids together, everyone, and pitching in wherever you can. And I find that kind of interesting also, that kind of conversation is coming back now. But we find it so different. We find it so crazy to even think in those directions, which might before be the norm. And then before they thought probably then one, like a couple would be weird. So
exactly. There's a book that unpacks all of this called Sex at Dawn, which actually goes into the biological, biophysical properties of all of this, right? There's some fascinating things around this. One thing is that women tend to be louder than men when they orgasm. Interesting. Why? Because they want to signal the other men that they're ready. So they can have sex with the next one. That's the assumption that Sex at Dawn lays out. And it goes even further than that. The motion in typical human sex is such that the next man tries to get the semen of the other man out. There's some weird shit in there. Maybe it's true, I don't know, but definitely doesn't align with how we do things right now, right? Right? I'm super monogamous, so I don't know, but the biology points in a different direction. It's weird. I definitely have to think about this for myself to come up with how do I want to relate to people. Okay. So then how do we nurture the body? How do we grow healthy bodies? How do we keep them healthy? And how do we reinstate health once and if it breaks down? That's a pretty straightforward one, at least on the surface. Any thoughts? Alim. You're muted. You had your hand up. I don't know if you want to talk.
For this question, I need more clarification, because like, what do we mean by healthy bodies? Do we have a shape or do we have a type?
Hmm.
And yeah,
That's a good question. I would begin to answer it by describing one thing. Seems to be a correlation between how your agility of getting up from the ground when you're sitting on the ground and your life expectancy. Right? So the more support you need to get yourself into a standing position from when you're sitting, the lower your life expectancy. So you should be able, your body should be able to move itself in such a way that you can get up from a sitting position on the ground without any help with your hands or holding on to anything. And it should do that in a fluid, elegant motion. That's a healthy body. I don't care about the shape of that body. I care about the function of that body. If you can do that weighing 200 kilos, I'm happy. That would be my definition of the healthy body.
No, it actually it's not a question. Like we should also consider this while answering this question. I mean,
Of course.
like,
Of course,
what
you
kind
need
of
to,
yeah.
for each of these questions, you need to define what you actually want to say here,
Yes.
right? These are full of abstractions, full of words that don't make sense standing by themselves. You have to fill them with life. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And have a conversation with your new dude from outer space, your friend from outer space around those questions maybe too. Maybe they solve them differently on their planet. Anything else? I just want to point to one obvious point that comes up usually in this question, and that is the interconnectedness between this question and question number one, and maybe number two. Because now we are supplying ourselves with food that does not help us in this point here. Right? And there's some complex interrelation between all of this. How are these connected? That's a very interesting path of exploration in this question. Nina.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because this question kind of says that we need to have a body in the future. And it doesn't actually, yeah, I don't know. What if we don't need to have a body? Maybe we grow consciousness or souls, and then you just put that into something else, and then you actually don't need food or anything, and you can be in some other thing that can feel the world without being, yeah, a source of energy needing food. Yeah, because it's not, yeah,
I have
because
some
it's kind
strong
of
opinions
saying that
about
we're
this,
gonna
but
have one. Yeah. Like, but it's still, is this then by a bias or is it?
Yeah, go ahead and explore that. I'm not going to say anything but one thing. Don't forget in this that the shape of your consciousness is tied to the shape of your experience, which is tied to the shape of your body. but I'm leaving it at that. But I like your train of thought. Okay. Anything else? Okay, final question. How do we cultivate conditions for individuals to develop a strong and evolving sense of coherence within themselves? This includes the capacity to make sense of the world, capacity to take action, and a purpose beyond the individual. Thoughts? Emily?
I mean, this question kind of feels like a culmination of all the other questions.
Mm-hmm. In what way?
Feels like if the things that come up here should be, well, could be, like all the other questions kind of put together, like all the conditions and all the answers and parts that each and every one of us come up with, and the other ones could or should or might be the elements that make up the conditions in that we want to find in this question, if that makes sense.
I think it
At
makes
least that's
sense.
how I see it.
So it could be that if you get this question right, the answers for the others evolve out of this. That could be one perspective, yes.
Or at least that there's some sort of link. Like,
well, there's linkage between all of them, right? There's linkage and cross dependence between all of them. That makes it, you'll find this, right? When you start answering them, that you will contradict yourself in part. And then you will have to solve these contradictions. That's the whole point. That's the sense of that there might be things that are left out, contradictions that I don't see, is what led to those questions. Right? That's they have overlap for sure. They're interconnected. And you can pick one that resonates more with you. This one seems to resonate a lot with you. For others, if you're an engineer or natural scientist, maybe number one, supply. How do we get stuff? And how do you shape stuff? How do you put atoms into new forms might resonate more. Or if you want to educate, the knowing question resonates more. Right? You can use any of those as a handle to get a grip on all of the questions for sure, but they all have to cohere. They all have to be in congruence with each other. Nina.
I think with this question, well, if you look at the other ones, I would say a lot of them are structural or systemic in a way, and then we have the relational and body, and then this is more what's within you, like whatever that is, and how you want to talk about, if it's your brain, if it's your soul, if it's your spirit, or whatever. But it's more, who you are and how you work and how you handle life and how you relate to being alive, I guess. So more, not consciousness, but in a sense, at least that's where I go with that. That's more you.
Yeah, that's also my interpretation of that question. And in that way, it obviously ties into all of them somehow, because it serves as a precondition. If you are on a fundamental level and as an individual aren't aligned with the others, other questions or the answers, then they will probably not work. So that's for sure an important one. Anything else? All right then. Okay. These are the rules. So we've talked about point A, right? Trust that future. Trust anything that comes up. James Cameron can create Avatar. You can also dream up a world, a different world, right? And what would that world look like if our species hadn't invaded Pandora? Different, for sure. So you can imagine something like that. Trust yourself in that. And you allowed, explicitly ask you to go crazy and dream. Just don't let the current reality restrict you. So you can look ahead 50 years, 100 years, or 1,000 years. You can move to another planet. Do whatever you need to detach from the here now. We don't want the restrictions of the here now. You already carry enough of those in you as you dream, so don't worry about those. And I promise you that we will address those later in the process. So don't burden yourself with them right now. Okay. Then I want you to take time to work with these questions yourself, in dialogue with yourself, in dialogue with your alien, in dialogue with some other people, anybody outside of this group. And if any clarifying questions around the questions come up, please ask them in our shared chat. And I will answer them there so that everybody is on the same page there. And then I want you to randomly choose one partner of your team. And once both of you are ready with answering your questions, I want you to share them with the other one. Your answers to the questions. Share them with this other person. And write up a version that you both can agree on. You will have to make some compromises, move more into the abstract, maybe sometimes you're super fully aligned. But don't settle for something you're not content with. Work together until you find consensus on the basic story. And once you've done that, get together with the other duo of your team. Right? I think you're all 4 in your team, right? In your teams. Is that right? Yeah, that works perfect. Okay, get together with the other duo and create a shared version for your team. When's the next session? I'm not sure. Lars?
It's on Wednesday, from Wednesday morning. And can I say one thing, Thomas?
Yeah.
Is that you have provided the morning on the Wednesday, on the Tuesday, and the Friday, I think. And I recommend that each exams team book that hour from 8 to 9. So send a message to Thomas and send an invitation to those mornings. It's really extremely valuable time you will have in those hours. So talk in the exam teams and coordinate and send one piece of information to Thomas who takes which day.
Okay. So yeah, what I want you to do is stop the share now. To have that shared dream of your team by Wednesday. And I want you to be able to share it with the others. So we'll start by sharing your dream with the other teams. And in the rules, there's written that it's helpful to describe that as a day in the life of somebody.
Yeah.
Future.
Sorry, Thomas. I think we have some vad heter det? Oppgaver. We have some. Sorry. Yeah, we have like presentation Monday and Tuesday, and yeah, we think it's a bit tight of time to get this ready for Wednesday.
Okay.
I don't know if the rest of the class agree on that or not.
Lars, you have an opinion? Nina?
Does it give meaning to break it down so that they take maybe the first questions to Wednesday, or do you want the totality, right?
No, I'll think about what a good time frame is, so that and I will think about how we use the time on Wednesday if we can't use it for this.
They can Thomas, they can work all day tomorrow, and I think that's a good one for doing the individual one, and then they need maybe some time on the Tuesday. Maybe we can talk about some aspects and questions on Wednesday, and then they have time in that afternoon to share. And then all of the rest until the 17th is at your disposal. We just need to finish some topics on the 6th and on the 7th, and then we have this inspiration day. But
okay, so maybe we do that sharing then in the groups, sharing then towards the end of next week. I will think about how I restructure the other things, and I will. So I think we have a meeting on Friday as well, right? On the 10th.
Yeah, you have a long day there on the Friday, I think, isn't it, right? I can go in to see. I have written you a overview.
So let's then let's say, can you do it until Friday in Teams? Yes. You're confident? Good. All right, then I will think about how we use our time on Wednesday and Thursday, and we will coordinate on the chat, I'd say that. And if there are any questions around the process, around the questions, you know what to do. Emily.
You just how much do you want us to, I mean, I'm supposing it's like however far we get, but it's like how much do you want us to do around each question? Because it could end up being like miles long, but with the time limit and like just how much would you like want us to aim for?
I would do it in the Einstein mode. 90 to 95% of your time is getting clarity in your mind, and 5 to 10% is actually writing it down. So I think the final result could be something between half a page or page per question. But surely there's going to be more in between, right? And yeah. Okay. Anything open? Anything you want to say? No. Okay. You know how to
One
reach me?
simple question.
Yeah.
One simple question. How many is having a good time? And it's okay to say I'm a little exhausted, but
Well,
this is awesome, Thomas. I think I should not say what I say to you, but because that's so stupid. But I just told you that I think that what we are doing now is absolutely amazing. These students are the most privileged students on the planet doing these days. This is blowing me away. This is serious, the highest level of learning I've seen. You've created a process to take charge of current state in the world. Let's get this out there. It's so amazing experiment we are doing, but I'm not the one to say because I'm always like that with its concerns with you. But this is so funny. I could continue for hours, but I think these guys are getting a little exhausted.
yes. And we need time to breathe and think and be in relaxation response in between, right? So let's allow ourselves to do that. I keep forgetting that there are things like weekends.
Yeah, but do you use it yourself?
Weekends?
Yeah.
No, I have so much relaxation during my days that I don't need weekends.
Yeah.
Nina, you have a question.
My internet is breaking up. Oh, can you hear me here? Because everyone froze on my computer. And you
Yes,
hear me?
we can
Okay,
hear
then
you.
I'm just gonna talk.
Your image is frozen, but
Yeah, no, I think I don't know how you guys feel about it. But and it's not necessarily about being tired or not, but I think it would be nice to go to the toilet and stuff in between and drinking enough water and maybe getting some blood flowing and getting some fresh air and stuff like that, opening a window, whatever. Yeah, it's still frozen on my screen. So I'm just like, I think maybe once an hour, at least 5 minutes to just run to the toilet and like jump up and down a little bit would be awesome.
So I see
10
Ingeborg
minutes.
agrees with that, and Thomas as well. So as I said, I'm not a big break taker. If I feel the need to do that, then I will tell you, and I expect the same from you.
Yeah.
I know that in 2 minutes I will give my neighbor a yoga lesson. So I get my movement. So I'm good, but I understand that you guys don't have that opportunity, probably. But yeah, so be in charge, Nina. Just tell me when we should take a break. I don't take breaks. Okay. Thank you all. It's a lot of fun. I cannot wait to hear your dreams and also hear more about your alien friends, explore more about the world. Maybe that's something you can do in the meantime. So we might want to go into more of what constitutes our reality here now next week. I'm not sure yet, but that might be. So spend some time with that new friend of yours and invite them into your circle of friends, maybe on the weekend. Go out for drinks with your alien. I'm sure that helps. Okay. Thank you. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a nice
Bye.
day. Thank you.
Thank you.